For this latest edition of my season as a United fan, I'm moving forward 4 years from the 92-93 vintage to a campaign that was, like most United seasons around this time, glorious. Welcome to the season 1996-97. However, by its close, we'd all be in shock, as it would signal the end of an era at the club. Just a bit of background, United had dominated the intermittent years since our last video, winning the double in 1994 and 96. That said, the boys hadn't really made a fist of it in the Champions League yet, and it was all well and good to be head and shoulders above your English peers, season in, season out, but back in the day, Busby made sure that United's legacy was built on European football, and predominantly the European Cup, now Champions League. It was time to step up. Old Trafford saw a flurry of transfer activity which would rival that of even the previous summer, where we'd seen Ince, Hughes and Kanchelskis all sold on. First of those taking a step down in their careers and leaving Old Trafford was one of my heroes from the early 90s, Lee Sharp. The left winger and former PFA Young Player of the Year was one of the reasons that United started to win trophies season after season thanks to his amazing pace and skill. However, plagued by injuries, including a reported bout of life-threatening meningitis, we let him go to rivals Leeds for £4.5 million. Maybe more significant in signalling the start of the end of an era was the departure of 35-year-old captain Steve Bruce to Birmingham City. This meant Eric Cantona took over as club captain. Also, injury-plagued fullback Paul Parker left after 5 years at United, and reserve keeper Tony Coton also moved on, this time to Sunderland. Now on to those coming into the club, or not, as Alan Shearer snubbed us once again after Fergie felt he'd done enough to finally get his man. However, the smug Geordie revelled in the actual transfer to his boyhood club Newcastle, which must have been so good for him missing out on all the trophies United won during his spell there, compared to what he managed not to win with the Magpies. On their way up Sir Matt Busby way were 4 notable signings in the summer of 96. 2 would go on to be of great importance to the club, the other 2 would pale into insignificance in the club's history. 27-year-old Norwegian Ronny Jonsson was an acquisition from Besiktas in Turkey for £1.2 million, whilst his equally anonymous countryman Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was signed from Norwegian second division side Molde for £1.5 million. The Scandinavians were joined by a Dutchman Jordi Cruyff, son of the famous father, and a Czech Karol Poborski who'd put himself in the proverbial shop window with a clever scoop-cum-lob goal at that summer's Euros. On top of this influx of European talent, Dutch keeper Raymond van der Gouw came in on a free as backup for Schmeichel. So let's kick off. After winning the double the year before, the runners-up in the previous season's campaign would be United's opponents in the Charity Shield. Newcastle United, who threw away their biggest chance for a league title since the 50s, looked to be amongst the top challengers this time around too, but they were summarily dispatched at Wembley 4-0, and the boys had already set down a marker for the season. United's opening 3 league games in August all looked very winnable, with Wimbledon away followed by Everton and champions of 2 seasons ago, Blackburn at home. The opening day encounter just showed the quality we had in the side since the emergence of the class of 92 had been welded together with the old guard. Eric Cantona opened the scoring for the season with a deft piece of control and a powerful finish. After Irwin's second goal seemed to have secured the game, David Beckham scored what would be the goal of the season with an audacious lob over Sullivan from the halfway line, which drew comparisons to Pelé. However, this air of invincibility was shattered after 2 poor draws at home. Against Everton we went into the break 2-0 down. Only a headed goal from new boy Jordi Cruyff and a late own goal saved us from humiliation, the match ending 2-2. We had similar issues against Blackburn, and it produced the same outcome, albeit with Cruyff's second goal in as many games being joined by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's confident debut strike. We ended the month unbeaten in 5th, with a few things to think about. The draw for the Champions League was soon made and pitted us against defending champions Juventus, Rapid Vienna and Fenerbahce of Turkey in the group stage. The 5-match league schedule for September looked a tad tricky on paper, with 3 away matches including one at Ellen Road, as well as having to take a trip to Villa Park, which was seldom easy in those days. A draw at Derby started the month with this Beckham beauty which was fast becoming his trademark, and that strike ensured a point after we went a goal down. He would end up as the PFA Young Player of the Year by the end of this campaign. The game at Leeds was phenomenal. After a bit of luck for the first goal, courtesy of Nigel Martin's head, it was then all United. It was probably Karol Poborski's best game in the United shirt because, unfortunately, very few others spring to mind. The Czech was instrumental in Nicky Butt's second, but his finish for the third was almost the best moment of the match. However, that accolade has to be reserved for this celebration by the King, right in front of the Leeds fans evoking quite rightly their absolute ire. But, as a Red, it was a thing of beauty. In this season more than any other, he had to do it there and then. A 4-1 tonking of what was by this time a yo-yo Forest side was a walk in the park after initially falling behind. Solskjaer was once again on the score sheet, and for any Red or anyone else who thinks that the Norwegian was just that goal in Barcelona in '99, he was our top scorer this season with 19. That's more than Cole, Cantona, Beckham or Giggs. That win took us to the top of the table, albeit briefly, as a goalless draw at Villa Park saw us quickly relinquish that. The baby-faced assassin, as Solskjaer was now nicknamed, got a brace against Spurs at Old Trafford at the end of the month, showing great touch and deadly finishing for a young man playing on such a massive stage. That 2-0 win took us to 4th by the end of September, still 4 points behind, but with the Scousers replacing Wednesday as leaders. Liverpool, for the first time since the very early 90s, looked like they had a chance of legitimately challenging. Just a quick note of interest, the last day of September saw the first day of Arsene Wenger's reign at Arsenal, with the unknown Frenchman taking the reins after the sacking of Bruce Rioch. Into Europe, and United kicked off their Champions League campaign against Juventus in Turin, but the Italians were too strong for us and they recorded a typical 1-0 win. However, the game on match day 2 at home to Rapid Vienna was far more straightforward. 2 first-half goals from Solskjaer and Becks was more than enough to dispatch the Austrian side, and we held second spot by the end of the month. The draw for the League Cup third round was made, and we would take advantage of a rule change, allowing clubs taking part in European competitions to get a bye from the 2-legged second round. We entered the competition at this stage, against Swindon at home. October looked fairly tricky on paper with Liverpool, followed by last season's malign runners-up Newcastle, and then a trip to the south coast to visit Southampton. However, things started well enough with a terrific Beckham daisy cutter doing for the Scousers, and reducing their lead over us to a solitary point. That robbed the Merseysiders of top spot to the Geordies, who would face next at St James's Park. I don't think that any United fan was prepared for what would happen on the 20th of October 1996, especially after the trouncing we gave them in the Charity Shield just a couple of months before. The game started badly, going behind after just 13 minutes. They doubled their lead through Ginola before half-time. It was getting worrying. Ferdinand Shearer and finally Philippe Albert did for us, as the game finished 5-0, and they extended their lead over us to 5 points. Apart from the excellence of the win, the media were already feeling sorry for Southampton, who were our next opponents, as we would apparently unleash all our fury on this perennial lower to mid-table side. Well, if the Newcastle defeat was a shock, what happened at the Dell was beyond surreal. The big turning point was the sending off of Roy Keane for 2 bookable offences, the first for dissent and the second for a foul. From then on it was always going to be difficult, as gaps would be left. Letitia made it 2 with a trademark chip of his before a superb free kick from Becks brought the score back to 2-1. The Big Dane let their big Norwegian striker Egil Ostenstadt score at the near post to see us 3-1 down at the break. David May made it 3-2 early on in the second half, but then 4 strikes happened in the last 6 minutes of the game plus time added on. Whether you hate him or hate him a bit more, Berkovic scored a cracker in the 84th minute to make it 4-2, but we still felt we could get something. However, Ostenstadt added 2 more, albeit one was recorded as a Phil Neville own goal, either side of a Paul Scholes consolation effort. We went down 6-3. Fortunately, the sides above us couldn't extend their lead over us, and we finished the month 5 points behind Arsenal, Newcastle and Liverpool, but with a decimated goal difference. On to the League Cup and the home tie against lower league Swindon. A win in this third round tie with a rotated side in between those 2 heavy defeats gave us some cheer at least, as we ran out 2-1 winners. The Champions League fixtures gave us 2 matches against Turkish champions Fenerbahce, and after the blood against Galatasaray, the former Turkish champions in recent seasons, we didn't know what to expect. The first match in Turkey actually saw us record a comfortable 2-0 win, and so when Fenerbahce came to Old Trafford after the Southampton game, we thought Turkey, Christmas. We'd been unbeaten at home in Europe for all of our history, but this snapshot from Elvir Bolic wiped away that 40-year-old record, and his goal was the only one of the game. This meant that it was a tad uncertain whether we'd make it to the quarter-final stage, with the top 2 going through from the group. Our first league game of November, and Chelsea decided to renew their bogey team status for us as they won 2-1 at Old Trafford, and according to the media, the United blip was turning into a crisis, as we had lost our 2-year unbeaten Premier League home record. An international break followed by Arsenal at home didn't seem to be the best tonic for this though. A question has been repeatedly asked over the last 25 years or so. Why didn't the all-English Arsenal back 4 and keeper that was so mean in the 90s get played altogether at international level? Well, I hope this delicious own goal from a very deserving Nigel Winterburn finally answers that question. It was an ugly win, and what made it ugly was the nasty challenge by Ian Wright on Schmeichel, and it wouldn't be the last we'd see of this. The following week we were the visitors at Brian Robson's Middlesbrough, who were struggling badly near the foot of the table. Disappointingly, we took the lead twice and we were pegged back twice, the game ending in a 2-2 draw, resulting in 2 drop points. The last game of the month was a welcome respite as we turned over Leicester City 3-1 thanks to 3 late goals. However, the Foxes had already done us 2-0 away in the League Cup, which they surprisingly went on to win that season, but given a choice, I'd have taken the 3 points any day over minor cup progression. Regardless, that win still saw us 5 points behind leaders Arsenal and Liverpool at the top of the league, with Newcastle also coming on strong. The legendary Alessandro Del Piero took us down in the Champions League as we lost 1-0 again in successive games at home in Europe. This defeat meant that we dropped out of the top 2 qualifying spots, so we had to rely on the Italians to beat Fenerbahce in December, whilst we, a point behind the Turks, had to beat Rapid Vienna in the Austrian capital in our last game to progress to the quarter-finals. December began with the final round of Champions League group fixtures. As just mentioned, we needed to beat Rapid and rely on Juve to do us a favour. Fortunately, we made life easier for ourselves with a comfortable 2-0 win thanks to Giggs and Cantona, whilst La Signora comfortably dispatched the Turkish side to allow us to both go through to the quarter-finals, where we were drawn against Porto, but we wouldn't have to worry about that until March. In the league, we started the month with 2 disappointing away draws. West Ham was more frustrating as we had a 2-0 lead thanks to Solskjaer and Bex, but with just 12 minutes left we let them back into it and could only skulk away with a point. 10 days later we went to Hillsborough and drew against a mid-table Wednesday side. It was fast becoming reminiscent of the early parts of the 92-93 season, where we couldn't convert points from average teams who were only spoilers in the grand scheme of things. We needed to pick up the pace if we were going to keep up with the chasing pack and leaders Arsenal, who were now 7 points ahead of us. Fortunately, the fixture computer gifted us 3 very winnable games around the Christmas period. 2 against relegation hopefuls and another against Leeds, who had already trounced back at their place in September. The game against the Black Cats was a treat for the 55,000 plus fans who'd come out, as we overran them 5-0, including this iconic and exquisite chip from the King himself, which really demonstrated that he was at the top of his game. A 4-0 drubbing of Forest at the City Ground followed, which set up nicely the Roses clash with Leeds at Old Trafford. The double over Leeds was achieved by a solitary goal, a penalty, fittingly dispatched with all his typical coolness by Eric Cantona. The 9th minute lead was comfortably held, and that was 9 points from 10 goals in 3 matches. Apart from the last match of the year, all of the leaders, Liverpool, Arsenal and Newcastle, dropped a ton of points against mediocre opposition across the whole Advent and Christmas period. This allowed us, unbeaten in the month, to now be within a couple of points of Arsenal and Liverpool at the top. A turgid goalless New Year's Day draw at home to Villa was followed by a run of 3 wins in the month that finally sent the boys back to the top of the table. We had to play Spurs back-to-back in the Cup and then the League. The home cup match was comfortable as Scholesy scored and then a Beckham free kick easily dispatched the Londoners. Away in the league, Ollie was at it again as he was on the score sheet with a neat finish and a 2-1 win at White Hart Lane. But then Beck scored a worldie for the winner late on, which was even better than the Derby County goal. Apart from the already established Giggs, he was fast becoming the star of the graduating class of 92 side. Against Coventry, a brilliant right-footed Giggs shot opened the scoring, with the Norwegian again featuring, albeit with a more low-key goal that went through Agrozovic. Back to the Cup again, and it was another double header. Wimbledon at home in the tournament, followed by part 2 in the league. You'd think taking the lead in the 89th minute would win you the game, as Scholes had done, but Robbie Earle with an injury time header earned the Dons a replay. In the league match, it felt like one of those days again. We hit the woodwork on no fewer than 3 occasions, whilst it was Wimbledon that took the lead this time around, which with around half an hour left to go in the game left us thinking, here we go again. Fortunately, it was Youth that once more won out, with a Giggs header and then a Cole finish from a Solskjaer shot that Sullivan couldn't hold. That got us the 3 points. A point clear at the end of the month, Newcastle's challenge essentially ended with a shock resignation of Kevin Keegan, who basically had enough. Kenny Dalglish took over, but their squad taking the lead at Old Trafford for the return match after their 6-3 humiliation of us back in October. Southampton were efficiently dispatched thanks to goals from Pallister and the King. But the real test would come at Highbury, as a top-of-the-table clash between us and Arsenal would give some indication as to where the title would be heading this time. And it was Wright versus Schmeichel Part 2. It was as if Ian Wright had been planning and waiting for an opportunity to do Schmeichel since the 16th of November's Bad Blood. Wright went for the Great Dane and got away with it again. There were massive afters in the tunnel at the final whistle, and even the old bill were needed. In the game itself, Andy Cole's superb finish rounding Lukic was complemented by Ollie's natural finish past the veteran Arsenal keeper, which Cole then celebrated as if he were the scorer. Any explanations welcome. Bergkamp's goal back wasn't enough, the 3 points were ours and Arsenal were mentally out of it, if not actually. Next up, and the draw against Chelsea showed Beck's finishing skills again as he volleyed in a poor Chelsea clearance, but that was after Gianfranco Zola made short work of walking through our defence to put them ahead. But we maintained our lead over Newcastle at the month's end. Earlier in February we had the Wimbledon replay, and in all honesty we looked tired with games coming thick and fast on heavy pitches at that time. On the night, Gale's goal was enough for Wimbledon, but watching that match at a bowling alley, I celebrated with mates on one of the lanes after Schmeichel's equaliser, only realising seconds before the final whistle that the score was still 1-0 and the Dane had been well offside, and then the whistle blew and we'd gone out. March started as February left off in the league with a comfortable win, this time 3-1 against Coventry courtesy of 2 own goals in 2 minutes. Remarkably, going to Roker Park for our last ever match at the ground, the struggling Black Cats should have been there for the taking, especially after their December mauling. However, with one of our few slip-ups since our unbeaten run started in mid-November, we managed to lose 2-1. Despite the surprise defeat, we kept top spot and 2 solid wins, this time at home to Sheffield Wednesday and then away to Everton, both by 2-0. This meant we entered the business side of the season 4 points clear, as Arsenal, Newcastle and especially Liverpool kept dropping points. United fans felt very comfortable in the lads securing the 4th title in 5 seasons, especially when you compare it to the uncertainty and drama of last year's campaign. So instead, our attention turned to a quarter-final matchup with Porto, who were not Juve or Ajax, but no slouches either. The first leg at Old Trafford seemed to give us an advantage, but there was some apprehension as we hadn't been at our best in the group stage and hadn't come close to mastering the premium European competition since we returned to it in 1993. I remember this game fondly, not just because of the scoreline, but because of how it was earned. The 4-0 win saw us weathering the storm early on, as the Portuguese had come to our patch to get something. Then, we got a goal from nothing through David May, and once again through Eric after a defensive error, and that seemed to put us in the semis already, and then who knows after that. Giggs and Cole's goals were the cherry on the top that night, and the feeling of knowing we're in our first European Cup or Champions League semi since '69 was unbelievable, and the fact the second leg was now a formality. Incidentally, that was drawn 0-0, putting us through to meet Dortmund, who we felt hardly needed to be feared. The first league game in April was another shock defeat, this time to Derby County at home. We were beaten by a mixture of bad luck, brilliance and bumbling defending. My brother's old classmate Ashley Ward and an incredible individual goal by Paolo Wanchop put them 2 up, and we were really having one of those days. A typical piece of Cantona control and finish. I really miss him. Put us within touching distance, only for Pally and Pete to make a mess of things for the third. A superb finish by the baby-faced assassin late on wasn't enough, and we went down 3-2. However, it didn't matter much as Newcastle drew, and thanks to Dion Dublin, Liverpool dropped points that weekend as well. We were away to struggling Blackburn the following week, and we played really well. The Frenchman's touches and instincts were as sharp as ever. Cole and Scholes put us into a 2-0 lead, and despite missing a pen early on, Eric got a deserved goal after a lovely penetrating run by Cole. Blackburn got one back, but we earned the 3 points. I was at Anfield a week after that with my Scouse mate, yeah I know, sitting amongst the filth. The league was almost done by this point, 7 points ahead of Liverpool and Arsenal, with only 5 matches left to play. Fortunately for us, David James was being David James, and the Scouse defence bottled it. Pally got the first with a header from a corner after just 30 minutes, and I was finding it difficult to keep my mouth shut amongst the enemy horde. Barnes equalised just a bit before half-time, but then we made a carbon copy of the first goal, albeit the flailing arms of James helped us out on that occasion. If David James played a supporting role in Pally's goal, he was a key player in Andy Cole's third for United, coming and failing to take a cross that the striker just had to knock over the line. We took the 3 points. I got out of Anfield alive, and we had a 9-point lead over Newcastle and Arsenal, and 10 over Liverpool with just 4 games to go. European success in the Champions League felt palpable as we travelled to Dortmund. The first leg was all about one man, unfortunately, German veteran defender and World Cup and Euros winner, Jürgen Kohler. He was like a one-man brick wall for Dortmund, but it still felt like we should have come away with something. Nicky Butt's shot against the post looked all the way like it should have gone in, and their goal scored by unknown midfielder René Tretschok, yeah, exactly, was the difference between the two sides as we felt robbed that night. The return leg just after the Liverpool game felt like a match that we were more than capable of winning by a margin to put ourselves in the final. We knew that we'd been unlucky in Germany. Instead of losing 1-0, we should have been defending a lead or at least an away goal at Old Trafford. There was a great atmosphere in the city as the yellow and black clad Dortmund fans had an amicable time taking over the city centre. However, in the match itself, the Germans were physical, resolute and determined. Their defence was giving 110% and they threw everything they could between us and the goal. We had several chances before Lars Ricken doubled their lead very early on. That didn't deter us, and Jurgen Kohler's defence of his goal on his backside from Cantona, who surely should have equalised, epitomised what we were up against. The remaining 82 plus minutes from Ricken's goal were a mixture of great Dortmund defending and poor and desperate finishing, topped up with a touch of bad luck. We went out 2-0 on aggregate, but we knew we'd made some progress that would put us in good stead in the coming years. That said, we hadn't lost at home in Europe for 40 years, but this season we'd lost 3 times. After that, May felt like a massive anticlimax. The poor challenge by Arsenal, Newcastle and Liverpool meant the title had been unofficially ours for weeks, and now, going out of the Champions League in the semis, when we felt that we were good enough to win it, caused a lull in performances. We actually clinched the title in the following game as all of these sides failed to win, handing us the Premier League trophy. We actually went on a mediocre run of 3 straight draws against Leicester, Middlesbrough and Newcastle, all performances which reflected our pedestrian finish to the season, although we did end the campaign with a 2-0 Old Trafford win over West Ham. But, as we discovered to our immense shock, sadness and disappointment, just a week later the second king of Old Trafford, to many Reds, decided to call it a day just short of his 31st birthday, as he wanted to go out at the top. That was certainly true. He was as good as ever and still a massive positive influence on the dressing room and the club in general. It felt like there was strong correlation between Eric being at the club and winning league titles and clicking as a side. Now we'd have to go on in another direction. Also, a tad worryingly, this was the lowest points tally that any side had won the league before or since from the time 3 points for a win was awarded in the 81-82 season. It wasn't a championship victory of a side that was head and shoulders above the rest, but one where the contender who made the fewest mistakes won. Compared to 95-96, we'd scored fewer goals, conceded more and had 7 fewer points. If we were to win the title again next year, especially with the loss of Cantona, we'd have to make some changes. So that was it. My season as a United fan, 96-97. But what were your memories of that 11th league title and the campaign as a whole? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you for your support.